And welcome to Ask Me Anything About Politics. This is the show where you can ask anything that you like about politics, and there's no judgments, there's no roasting, there's no debating. It is just good faith answers to all of your good faith questions. I know politics can be really intimidating when you're first trying to learn about it. I know it can feel like trying to learn a new language. So, this is the place where you can ask all your questions and you don't got to worry about getting roasted or judged. What's up, Grimicus? Good to see you again. So, yeah, all questions are welcome, regardless of if you are a Republican, a Democrat, something in the middle, something on the outskirts. Everybody is welcome here. This is not a show for fighting or roasting or debating. There's no harassment or bullying that happens on this show. So long as you're asking a question in good faith, you will get a good faith response. I know politics can be really difficult to figure out if you don't know what's going on, especially now with all of the misinformation and propaganda that's running rampant out there. D. Scott says, "Did you see Crockett break down in front of the Oversight Committee?" I didn't. Wow, I'm sure that must have been. I'm sure that must have been a real thing to witness. So yeah, what's up, Elaney? Good to see you again, Misty Lane. David says, "What's your stance on term limits?" I'm for them. Any questions about politics are welcome from anybody on the political spectrum, whether you are a Democrat, a Republican, something in the middle, something on the outskirts. You will not be judged or fought or made fun of. Um, for your question, regardless of how simple, complicated, left wing, right wing it is. Daniel says, "What do you prefer, a parliamentary system or a presidential system?" I don't know enough about parliamentary systems to judge. What's up, Triska? Great to see you again. Misty Lane says, "When is it time to say not in my city?" I think it was. I think it was that time, like a year ago, probably. Ben says, "Opinion on Taiwan-China relations." I would just say I pray for the people in Taiwan based on the new international order that Trump is starting with him invading Venezuela. There's really no justification for us to poo poo China taking over Taiwan because we're doing that to other countries, so why can't they? I don't think that they should, but you know, what's to stop them now? 312 says, "Did you see the new video of the ice pew pew?" No, I did not. Ott to be me says, "How does one get you to actually answer a question?" You asked one. Ought to be me. Ready. Elaney says, "Should you wait for it to happen to you or your family or your neighbor?" No, I think seeing somebody else, seeing it happen to a stranger is enough. Because there, but for the grace of God, go I. First they came for some random woman in Minnesota, and I said nothing because I didn't know that woman. No, that's how the poem goes. Okay, Grimmica says, "I saw a ProPublica article earlier talking about how the Bureau of Prisons has lost a bunch of employees to ICE recruitment this past year. As of mid-December, it was around 1,700 people, which is about 5% of the Bureau of Prisons' total workforce and accounts for as much as a 20 to 25% of the staff at some prisons. Any thoughts?" I mean, I think it makes sense if we are looking at a potential better pay structure. Like one of the things that is so insidious about ICE is that they are offering people so much money to join their, you know, Trump's personal private Gestapo. And I find it insulting on a couple of reasons, not the least of which being that we were just told that we couldn't afford things like researching new cancer drugs or feeding people or subsidizing housing or universal health care or even subsidies for the Affordable Care Act. But no, we can give people who want to destroy communities and destroy families like a $50,000 bonus or some shit like that. We can pay $100,000 to every citizens of Greenland to take over that fucking country, but we can't afford any scientific research or technological research in this country. It's fucking disgusting, man. But yeah, I'm also worried about, are people that usually work for prisons more morally bankrupt or less than the people that would be working for ICE normally? Like, I don't know. Moore says, "More hair, less talk, or less hair, more talk?" I say less hair, more talk. One Arik says, "Are you right or left wing?" I am left wing. CS17 says, "My name is Mom Donnie. Universal childcare already delivered in 8 days." That is excellent. Ross says, "What's your favorite Stalin quote?" I don't think I have any Stalin quotes at all, let alone having so many that I can have a favorite one. Bert's, great to see you again. I'm glad that you're doing good. I'm doing okay. It's been a very busy day so far, but happy that the weekend is coming up. Chris says, for sure, ICE are more morally bankrupt than prison guards. I mean, they're one of the same now, right? Because the prison guards are all leaving to join ICE. Timothy says, what do you think of Kristi Noem allegedly stealing funds for a family farm? The main ethos of the Trump administration is corruption and theft, end of story. And so you will see stories about Kash Patel wasting FBI money so that he can fly his honeypot girlfriend all over the country. You'll see stories about Kristi Noem wasting taxpayer money so she can buy herself some private jets to fly around on. You will see stories about Donald Trump selling pardons so that people will buy more of his cryptocurrency. Like, yeah, it's corruption from the top down. And if you are out there wondering, like, why is this a problem? Like, how does it affect me? Let me know. We can talk about it because, god damn, it's fucking disgusting the way that these guys are just stealing money hand over fist with zero accountability because the Republican Party is either completely feckless, terrified, or equally corrupt. St. Tiger says, I've never heard any of those stories. Any of the stories of the corruption? Because I'm happy to send you more information about that, St. Tiger, if that is something that you're interested in. The Great Depression says, Texas just handed all voter information to the Trump administration. Well, you know, it's Republicans who don't give a shit about your privacy. They don't give a shit about your information being, you know, weaponized by the Trump Justice Department or ICE. Melissa says, our taxpayer dollars are funding it all. Yeah, it's disappointing and infuriating. Okay. Italiana says, thoughts on when Trump is out of the White House, you think next Democratic president will restore the East Wing? I think it will be difficult depending on how much construction has already been done on the ballroom. I don't know how well that whole process is working right now because they've been firing architects and shit like that. So, yeah, I mean, I would love to see something happen there. You know, like, let's restore some fucking dignity to the White House instead of having it be just, you know, a tackier version of Saddam's palace. Brian Barbitta says, do you feel she shouldn't have put herself in that situation? No, it wasn't her decision. You know, it was ICE. Ian says, I know nothing about politics. Should I get into politics? I think every human being should have a base understanding of our politics and government, Ian. And if I can help you do that, I'll be happy to. East meets Westy, great to see you again. Says the entire regime using our tax dollars in the treasury as their personal bank account. Accurate. L Predictor says, would you debate Nick Fuentes? I don't know. On the one hand, I think I would relish the opportunity to tell him that he's a piece of shit to his face. On the other hand, like, I don't think that it's worth legitimizing people who believe that Jewish people don't have any value and that women shouldn't be able to vote and shit like that. He wouldn't debate me. He would not even talk to me because I have a Jewish last name, and he views me as worthless. He's a piece of shit. I'm also in an interracial relationship, so I'm sure that him just hearing that I exist is going to make him puke his guts out or something. Faga War, great to see you again, says, as a history nut, I've decided that Donald Trump is America's first Ottoman Sultan. That's interesting. I don't know enough about the Ottomans to comment on that, but I trust you. Okay, Pump Shark Gun says, free Palestine. Hell yeah. Seaflon says, terrible situation that could have been avoided by both parties in Minneapolis. I disagree with that, Seaflon. So here's the thing about ICE. ICE will tell you to do two completely different things, and we have multiple reporting on this, where one person is saying, get out of the car, another person is saying, move your vehicle. And so people get terrified and they get scared. It is not our responsibility to not get murdered by ICE. It is their responsibility to de-escalate and to not terrify us so that we can comply with their orders. This happened because ICE wanted it to happen. End of story. Oh, I'm a little angry today, guys. So sorry. Okay, Dan Blackwood says only one party was firing the murder weapon. Accurate. Allie, great to see you again, says, what do you expect happens next? Another coup attempt at the end of this term. Nobody can predict what's going to happen in the future, Allie. And I'll say what I always say, which is that it is up to us to decide what the future is going to be. So don't wait for the prediction that you desperately want to hear. Do the thing that will make the version of the future that you want happen. Do the work. Okay. Harry's the coolest. Says there was a crowd. How do you know it was an officer that said leave? I'm basing that off of reporting that I have heard from credible sources, Harry's. If you would like me to forward you those sources, I happily will. King says JD Vance 2028. That is exactly the kind of comment that gets you blocked because it's not a question. Okay, structured librarian says sorry, but it's getting exhausting. It's like a boiling frog with you guys. I mean, I don't understand what. I mean, are we not mad enough for you? I would love for Americans to be doing more, but you know, yeah, who's you guys? Like, are you not an American? Are you referring to us Americans? John Enos says, how can I become a paid agitator? I believe Republicans hire people to do that sort of thing. So I would say it's like look into, you know, Talking Points or Breitbart or one of those shits. Brian says her vehicle was parked perpendicular to obstruct ICE from furthering into the city. No, she was making room for other cars to get ahead. But again, it is not our responsibility to not get murdered by ICE. No matter what she did, it is not okay for ICE to just unilaterally decide that somebody deserves execution, Brian. And so a lot of this sort of like, you know, both sides ism, what did she do to deserve this kind of thing? It's a distraction from the underlying issue, which is that ICE murdered a person. There we go. All right, scrolling down. 45 says ICE doesn't have nearly the training of federal agents or even police officers. That is accurate. That is the fault of the Trump administration. The fact that there are people out there with not enough training, dressed in military garb, with weapons, it's dangerous, it's irresponsible. It has resulted in more deaths than illegal immigrants have committed in the past year. Dan, Triska, Daniel, thank you so much for helping me reach my first gift goal of the day. Trav says, no, ICE is doing their job. I mean, yeah, if their job is murdering people and denying people their civil rights. Trav, do you really have no problem with ICE doing this? What if they did it to somebody that you cared about? What if they did it to somebody that you loved? Okay, Wyatt says we need to get rid of ICE. Completely agree with that. They were a rogue agency. Okay, Jacob says it's not murder when it's in defense. Well, it was not in defense. She was not a threat to them in the slightest. Brian says 100% agree. I just disagree with her putting herself in that situation. ICE was wrong though, 100%. I'm glad we agree on that, Brian Barbita. But I would also like to acknowledge that ICE is putting people in difficult situations. Like, I don't think that she was there like, I'm going to obstruct ICE. I think she was trying to live her life, and ICE was there, and it was chaos, and she didn't know how to react. Let's see here. User now says, oh, please, what world do you live in? That is an example of the kind of comment that gets you blocked. It's not a question. Real Benda says, hi, Jared. Are ICE agents not required to complete even basic law enforcement training? No, they are not. ICE they've had their budget tripled because Stephen Miller, our shadow president, desperately wants there to be no more brown people living in this country. And they need a lot more people. They need a lot more bodies in order to make that happen. So they are just throwing money at people, hiring any fucking ding-dong off the street, zero training, zero background checks, etc. It's fucking disgusting, man. Daniel D. Scott, Dan, thank you so much for helping me reach my second gift goal of the day. Brian says, however, I think it's intellectually dishonest to say that she wasn't trying to obstruct ICE. I don't think that she was. And I'm not being intellectually dishonest. I do not believe that that's what she was doing. Okay, let's see here. 45 says 2 more people were injured by ICE agents in Oregon also. Yeah, and somebody in politics in Oregon, I can't remember if it was a mayor or a governor or head of law enforcement, said what we're all thinking, which is that the federal government said that these shootings were justified, but I think it's clear that we can no longer trust what they are saying because they are liars. Dylan Farm says, how do you not think that? Are you rage baiting? No, I just don't think that. ABCDEFG says, did you see the new video? No, I did not. Daniel says, I believe that thing in Portland was actually border control. Yes, it is true. It was border control and not ICE. Zoom GLI says, is it true that many ICE officers quit? That I do not know. Harry says, funny, all the red states have the worst education and healthcare. I don't think it's a coincidence. You know, the Republican Party defunds education so that they can trick more people into voting for Republican or trick more people into joining the armed services. Topta says, as a German, the ICE troops remind me a lot of the Sturmbot League. How do they differ? As far as I can tell, I can see no difference. Topa. Ilma says, you just said free Palestine. What does that mean? Do you mean all of Israel needs to be Palestine? No, it means I do not believe that Israel should be, turning Palestine into an open air prison. I do not believe that Israel should be doing war crimes or G-sides against the people of Palestine. I am not pro Hamas. I am pro the citizens of Palestine. I am pro the citizens of Israel. I am against the governing bodies of both of those countries. Cool Breeze says, what's your opinion on the Tuskegee experiment? I don't know a ton about it, but if I'm remembering correctly, it was the government illegally doing scientific experiments on black people, and that's obviously terrible. Okay, let's see here. Cade says, have you seen the DoorDash video where the woman ran inside and hid? No, I did not. Brian says, I respect your opinion. However, I think we shouldn't put ourselves in potential bad situations. Brian, again, I don't want to argue about what this woman did or did not do. But I think it's important to recognize that our accountability only goes so far. If I'm trying to go to the grocery store and there is an ICE raid happening between me and my groceries, is me going about my business, me putting myself in a bad situation? Is it okay for the, not okay to, I know you're agreeing with me about it's not okay what they did. But like, what's my responsibility there? If I walk 5 feet, realize that there's an ICE operation going on, and it's dangerous, and then I try to go back home, but then I'm in the middle of some shit already. Like, is that my responsibility? How much blame do I deserve? You know, I really appreciate you saying that we agree on the sort of like, ICE being responsible for this. I just worry about the slippery slope of what responsibility do the people who got shot have. And so I'm going to be dogmatic about that. I can appreciate it if you do not want to be dogmatic about that. I feel like we give way too much wiggle room to the right-wing agitators in this country, where Republicans can never do anything bad enough to justify voting against them, and Democrats can never do anything good enough to justify voting for them. We never give Democrats any credit. We never give Republicans any blame. And I am part of a movement trying to change that dichotomy because it's not fair and it creates an environment of injustice that we're currently living through. Party says obstructing ICE doesn't deserve a death sentence. That is accurate. Alan says, to start off, do you believe in God? I don't believe in a specific God. I believe that the universe is crazy and weird and vast. I believe that there are more things between heaven and earth that are dreamt of in our philosophy, Horatio. Real Bendis says, however bad things get here, I don't think it's proper to compare to Nazis' thoughts. I think that the connections between the way that the Trump administration is behaving and the way that ICE is behaving and the Nazi Party are too vast to ignore. I know that Nazis have been used as this like political hot button word to try to discredit your political opponents. It's been happening for decades. But at a certain point, we have to recognize like these people are doing Nazi shit. These people are doing Shitler shit. Like, it's just obvious, And the idea that those words have been overused and have no meaning anymore, and it's just, the left calls the right Nazis, the right calls the left Nazis, it's all the same, is a tool that they use to try to muddy the waters. Like, it is clear what they are doing. It's Nazi shit. Plain and simple. All right. Alan says, then what is the basis of your morality? Do unto others what you would have them do unto you. There, but for the grace of God, go I. Empathy, sympathy. What kind of world do I want to live in? There's an innate feeling to morality, but there's also a logic to morality. Like, if I think might makes right, then what does that mean for the people that are stronger than me? Just being able to take over my house and take all of my stuff and take my wife, So yeah, morally, empathetically, logistically, that just makes sense to me. 45 says, not that it matters, but was this person Latina or white? I'll explain. What a weird thing to say. Alan says, then do you support the LGBTQ community? Yes, I do. Uber Jordan says, Trump against the American Congress. What do you think? I think that we are not seeing nearly enough Republicans in Congress jumping ship for that to be a fair fight. Additionally, Trump has the Department of Justice and the Supreme Court in his pocket. And so we need to have a unified Congress against what Donald Trump is doing. And the fact that there are any Republicans voting against limiting his ability to start war or annex territory, the fact that there are any Republicans who aren't calling for impeachments because of what ICE is doing and because of the e-files and because of all the corruption that's going on in the Trump administration, I think completely illegitimizes the entire Republican Party. Okay, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, the Supreme Court in his pocket. Yeah, he seated 3 of the Supreme Court justices. He has a 6-3 supermajority of conservatives. They've already voted to give him legal immunity for anything that he does in office. So yeah, they're in his pocket. Alan says, do you support abortion or are you pro-choice? I'm pro-choice, but even if you are pro-life, you should still vote for Democrats because abortion bans do not decrease abortions. They don't stop abortions. They don't decrease them. They only make pregnancy more dangerous for women. And if you really want fewer abortions in this country, Democratic policies do that. Republican policies do not. ABCDEFG says, any president, not Trump. I don't know what that means. Oh, no, it is Trump, ABCDEFG, because they put in that ruling that they're only immune for things that are quote unquote official acts. And who decides what is official acts and what are not official acts? The Supreme Court, 3 of which Donald Trump sat, and 2 of which are right-wing extremists. So yeah, it is just for Trump. Alan says, do you believe in centralized government? I'm not really sure what that means. ABCDG says, so they're overthrowing it when he gets out? I sure hope so. Patrick says, go Trump, best president ever. That is an example of the kind of comment that gets you blocked. I don't care if you have different political opinions than me, but actually ask a question and be part of the conversation. Topa says, I'm pro-Israel and pro-Palestine, but against Netanyahu and Hamas. Why is not differentiated in public discourse? Because there are people out there who benefit from it being cloudy and muddy. There are people out there who, when they hear you say free Palestine, they say, oh, you love Hamas. There are people out there that when you tell them you believe that the people that are currently living in Israel have a right to stay there, then they think that you mean, oh, so you think that what Netanyahu's doing is fine. That muddying, that fight starting is a benefit to right-wing politicians and the billionaire class. That's why I refuse to engage with it. ABCD says, you don't even realize what comes out of your mouth. You just negated your Supreme Court theory. Congratulations, you are out of here. Daniel says, do you think secularism should be explicitly stated in the Constitution? I believe it is. I believe separation of church and state is explicit in the Constitution. Is it not? If anybody is a constitutional scholar, let me know. Alan says, do you believe in owning private property? Sure, I don't have a problem with that. Robin says, so we don't have 3 branches of government anymore, not working branches, right? I mean, if you look at what the Supreme Court and Congress has done over the past year, then you could make a very substantive argument that we no longer have 3 branches of government. There is the possibility that the judiciary or the Republican Congress wakes up at some point and actually starts asserting their power as equal branches of the government. But I don't know. It seems like it's kind of starting, but not fast enough, for my opinion, for my liking. Daniel says, that's why I ask, should it be more explicit? I suppose. But again, I'm pretty sure it's explicit already. All right. Stuka says, what do you think about Laos government home policies? I don't know anything about the government of Laos, so sorry about that. And thank you, Triska, Muzz King, and East Meets Westy for helping me reach my 3rd gift goal of the day. And you know what that means? It is time for finger hearts. It is finger hearts o'clock. Phil says, voting matters, people. The president gets Supreme Court picks. That is accurate. Pourquoi says, would you vote for someone opposed to the liberation of President Maduro? Would I vote for somebody who is opposed to the liberation of President Maduro? Yeah, sure. I don't think that what we did to the people of Venezuela in invading their country and stealing their leader was a good thing to do. But now that he's in America, it seems like that milk has already been spilt. So, I mean, we might as well try him for his crimes since he's here. I don't think that it would be just for us to return him to Venezuela. I could be wrong about that. I'm open to hearing contrary opinions on that. But yeah, it makes sense to me. You know, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if returning Maduro today would stop any sort of potential political backlash to the opposition movements in Venezuela. So I don't know. At this point, you know, a bunch of damage has already been done to that country and to our, you know, and to our reputation on the world stage. So I don't know. Doesn't really seem like the move. Again, I'm convincible. I'm open to arguments against that. Robin says Trump didn't take the president of Venezuela because of what he did. He wants their oil. That is accurate. Brian says you're just 100% false saying they don't have a case. LOL. Who doesn't have a case, Brian? What are you talking about? Stet says he should be tried in international court if anything. Well, unfortunately, America does not, recognize the authority of the ICC. So, Veed says, "Sup, Jared? What's up to you?" Yeah. Not you, Jared. Sorry, talking to a fellow viewer. All right, cool, Brian. You're good. Real Bendis says, do you think that political pressure will eventually lead to criminal indictment of the ICE agent? I don't know if it will, but what I say, Real Benda, is let's be part of that movement. Let's try to make that happen. Let's put political pressure on our elected representatives to make the thing happen, as opposed to crossing our fingers and hope that it happens. I need to slow down today. I just realized I'm talking like 1,000 miles an hour. I gotta chill the fuck out. I'm sorry. I was just listening to a podcast where people were talking about all the shit that Trump's done lately, and it just sometimes it just hits the right brain cell and makes me so fucking pissed. Dan Blackroyd, Triska, Eats Meets Westy, the Fixer. Thank you for helping me reach my first finger heart goal of the day. All right, Sid Lane says, do you think Biden was fit to be president? That is a really good question, Sid. So I read Jake Tapper's tell-all book about all of the people who knew that Biden was in cognitive decline while he was president and decided to lie and hide that information from the rest of us. So I think an argument could be made that he was at least an okay and capable president during his 4 years, but that he 100% was not capable of running for a second term or even surviving that second term. An argument on the other side of things is what the Biden administration did was great. Like, they did a lot of really great stuff. The Inflation Reduction Act, the largest investment in green energy in world history, the CHIPS Act, the PACT Act, capping the cost of insulin, walking the picket line, the extremely dangerous trip into Ukraine to meet with Zelensky. Like, all of that was pretty incredible. So if he wasn't fit to be president and he still did all that shit, like, fucking give me that again. Give me another fucking incapable of being president Democrat. Right, Topa says, with scaring away NATO partners like Europe and not establishing a friendly relation to Russia and China, who are the allies of the U.S. Here in Europe, we don't feel like allies anymore. The allies of the U.S. are all of the dictators around the globe who do not threaten Donald Trump's authority. So Bukele is El Salvador, right? Or is that Argentina? I forget. But yeah, Argentina, El Salvador, North Korea. But he's in direct competition with people like Putin. And so while he's not necessarily allied with Putin, the two of them kind of have this, unspoken understanding that, all right, you get to carve up Europe and I get to carve up the Western Hemisphere, easy peasy. The Republic of Mordor, that's very funny, damn. Misty Lane says, how are you going to win Gen Z knowing they are almost all economic leftists, but some of them disagree on social issues? I've seen a lot of reporting about how Gen Z men are abandoning the Republican Party. I'll believe it when I see it, but I think the key is to not be the version of leftists that they think exist. And so, I've been talking about this for a long time, that I think that there are people out there who are being paid to pretend to be leftists and just be the shittiest version of a leftist, so that like Gen Z men can look at that and go like, look at these fucking cucks and woke idiots. And so I'm going to refuse to be a part of that movement. And hopefully enough people will do this thing that that idea of what it means to be a left-wing man will change. What's up, Lauren? You never have to apologize for anything. Alan says, communism or capitalism, which do you prefer? So we've never, it's interesting. Okay. Short version, Alan, both of those systems can exist in the same country, depending on how you define communism. The way I define communism is workers owning the means of production. So any company that is employee-owned is essentially communist. And we have employee-owned companies in America already. I think we should incentivize companies to be employee-owned so that we have a little more communism and a little less capitalism in this country. We are living through the negatives of unchecked capitalism right now, with skyrocketing prices for housing, education, healthcare, etc., with rampant corruption. Like, this is what capitalism right now is, what they told us communism would be during the Red Scare. And so while I am not going to come on here and say that the entire government should be communist and there should be no property at this point, I do think that we need to do things about regulating capitalism and fixing the unbelievable, incalculable income inequality that we're living under right now, where there are people dying on the street while a couple of thousand people are flying around on private jets having fucking caviar and lobster 3 meals a day. Alrighty, let's see here. Shawnee Flytrap says, does it feel like they're escalating the phase of the dictatorial overtake, or is it just me? Yeah, I think that they are shook by the way that these recent elections have been going in Democrats' favor. And so they're like, we're fucking cooked here unless we start doing the real evil shit that makes it impossible for people to vote against us, meaning jailing our political opponents, murdering people, rounding up political dissidents and throwing them in jail, seizing voting machines, using ICE to intimidate people or close down roads on their way to the polls, shit like that. So we just have to be vigilant. We have to be even more doing the work to stop them than we were before. Okay, Kate says, what do you think of Jared Kushner and his policies, if that's how you spell his name? And Dan Blackroyd accurately responded, what policies? Kushner is not a politician. Yeah, Cade, I'm going to answer a little more respectfully, a little less snarky than Dan Blackroyd did, to say that I don't know that Jared Kushner does have any policies besides making himself extremely wealthy. He is kind of like a shadow Secretary of State right now, where he's flying all over the country making business deals in exchange for political favors from the Trump administration. I mean, his platform is corruption for him and his buddies. So, exactly, himself and his daddy. Alrighty, Brian says, unless it is an imminent threat of physical harm or death, verbiage from the case, that is accurate. Okay. Sid Lane says, do you think the Democratic Communist Party is turning to communist values? I don't believe that we have a Democratic Communist Party in this country, Sid Lane. All right, let's see here. Brian says, the idea of a left-wing man is so false in today's society, it's unfortunate. Yeah, 100%, Brian. I am with you. Real Bendis says, do you agree they should have pulled Biden as the candidate well before that awful debate performance? Yes, Real Benda, with an asterisk, which is, we did not know that that's what Biden was like, because the people in his immediate circle and his family were hiding that information from us. People want to blame Nancy Pelosi or Chuck Schumer for that shit. They were as in the dark as the rest of us. But it was his, immediate team and his family members that were sort of like hiding that information from the rest of us. Oscar says, do you guys know what communism is, bro? There are a bunch of different definitions for communism. Some people just use it as a catch-all, meaning bad things. And some people believe it is just workers owning the means of production. Kate says, who would your ideal Democratic candidate for president be? I always punt on this question because I am trying to get everybody focused on the midterms and not the presidential elections. We got elections happening this November, and we all got to do the work for it because the Trump administration is not stopping. They are accelerating their bullshit. Oh, excuse me. All right, East Meets West, he says, there was no physical possible way they could hide that from Pelosi. I would ask you to check out Jake Tapper's book, East Meets Westy, because that is what all of the reporting suggests. Let's see here. Dave Love Wife says Trump is great. Well, Dave Love Wife, you be block. All right, scrolling down. Real Bendis says, what are your thoughts on Mark Kelly in 28? A reelected candidate may be the best candidate. Yeah, I generally agree with that. I like Mark Kelly. He's not my first choice, but I like him a lot. Let's see here. East Meets West, he says it's poor journalistic reporting. Interesting. Yeah, I mean, unless you have some evidence, East Meets Westy, that Pelosi knew what was going on. Every bit of information that I have seen suggests that she did not know. And when they did know after the debate, they, kicked it into high gear and started putting pressure on him to drop out. This might be one of those things where we just have a difference of opinion, where I believe it's possible that they didn't know and you don't, and I think that's totally fine. All right, Sid says Jake Taft was behind the Democratic Communist Party till he got called out for lies. Sid, I am going to warn you that that is not a question. It is kind of a nonsense comment. So ask a question in good faith or I'm going to boot you. Oscar says, I'd like to hear why you dislike Trump. Yeah, how specific do you want me to get, Oscar? Because he is a corrupt liar, a serial cheater who has screwed people out of payments, like he screwed workers. He's screwing the working class. He is actively destroying this country. There are bodies that he is responsible for. He fucked up the COVID response so that an extra 100,000 people died just in this country alone. The corruption, the grift, the lying, the similarities to what he's doing versus other fascist regimes have done, his destruction of international alliances, invading Venezuela illegally, threatening to take over Greenland, having a cryptocurrency. Like, there's the list of things to hate about him are vast. Alrighty. Daniel says he owes cities hundreds of dollars for security fees from 2020. That is accurate. JP says, I dislike Trump since his Pizza Hut commercial. That's very funny. Grimicus says, Biden never should have been running in 2024. He said when he got elected that he was not going to run again, and he should have kept into that. I completely agree with that. Real Bendis says, so you believe that high-ranking Democrats, including Harris, Pelosi, and Schumer, didn't know? Again, that's what Jake Tapper's book said. Some people disagree with that. I think it is perfectly reasonable to assume that that was possible. Because we saw what happened when they were able to see what Biden was like. I don't think they would have allowed that debate to happen if they knew that Biden was going to do that. But again, until I see any evidence of otherwise, that is the world that I am living in. Lydia says, has the Dem elite understood that AIPAC money is now a deal breaker? Lydia, the Democratic Party is moving away from AIPAC and Netanyahu in a way that has not happened in a very long time. And the Democratic Party has the only politicians who are willing to stand up to Israel and to AIPAC. I do not think that taking AIPAC money should be a deal breaker, because if you got two people in the general election, one of them is a Democrat who took AIPAC money, one of them is a Republican who took AIPAC money, I think the Democrat should get your vote 100%. Because by getting that Democrat into office, you are empowering all of the Democrats who have stood up to AIPAC and Netanyahu. Does the party leadership understand that there are people who are very dogmatic about this issue and want the Democratic Party to be putting more distance between themselves and AIPAC and Netanyahu? I don't know. I find it hard to believe that they wouldn't see these political wins, but there's a little bit of a, bubble in Washington D.C. and people like Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries might be a little bit too busy with the everyday battles of leading their caucuses than being able to take the temperature of the American citizens. So yeah, I don't know where they're at, but I would encourage people to not view taking AIPAC money as a deal breaker for Democrats. Alan says, thoughts on crypto? I have not seen any use case for crypto besides corruption and crime. Kimberlina says, when are we going to see ICE convoys in Texas or Florida, or not good for political theater? I don't know. That's a really good question, Kimberlina. Like, I can see them doing it because it's an easy win for them. Like, people aren't going to be as mad about it. But I also think that they are doing this to, like, intimidate and create chaos in Democratic areas. So, yeah, I think that that motivation makes complete sense to me, that they would be sticking to blue areas. Robin says, do you think Trump will make 4 years? I don't know. Pieces of shit tend to live forever. You ever notice that? Lydia Carmela says, why make an excuse for AIPAC and not other foreign lobbying? Okay, Lydia, so that's a little bit of a complicated question. First of all, AIPAC is not technically a foreign lobbying organization. I agree with you that there is zero daylight between their goals and Israel's goals under the Netanyahu government. But because AIPAC is funded exclusively with American money, it technically is not a foreign lobbying organization. I do not make allowances. What was the phrase that you used? You said, why do you make an excuse for AIPAC? I'm not making an excuse for AIPAC. AIPAC fucking sucks. But I think that we need to have grace for Democratic politicians who have less ability to raise capital than Republican politicians. 75% of all billionaire political donations go to Republican Party candidates. And so how can Democrats stay competitive if they eschew all lobbying money? Now, there are certain Democrats who are like world famous, like AOC and Bernie Sanders, who are able to make up that difference with small dollar donations. But if you're running for, state senates in Nevada or some shit like that, like, it is virtually impossible for you to be competitive unless you play that ball. Now, until we can fix a boatload of other problems that give political advantages to the Republican Party, I think we need to give the Democratic Party some grace here and not force them to unilaterally disarm in the, taking corporate and lobbying money war. I understand, like, I am with you that campaign finance has become a fucking corruption quagmire, and we should be supporting politicians who are brave enough to try to get elected without that money. But I don't think it should be a deal breaker if somebody, to be competitive, to make sure that they win a seat from a Republican candidate, takes that money. In the primary, I will still vote for the Democrat that didn't take the lobbying money. But in the general, it's got to be fucking Democrats all day, because a Republican is going to be way worse on that issue and every other one. Right, Brian says, thank you, Jarrett. You must play dirty to be competitive, an unfortunate but true reality. I don't necessarily think that it means playing dirty, Brian, to accept those campaign finance funds. We know psychologically that if you take money from a lobbying organization, you are much more likely to legislate in their favor. But there's a difference between a Democrat watering down their progressive legislation because they received corporate or PAC money and a Republican who was going to do that shit anyways, to give corporations way more money so that they can be bribed again in the future and get reelected. Driska, Eats Me Westy, Scotty Max, Sunlight, and The Fixer, thank you for helping me reach my second finger hearts goal of the day. Alrighty. You know what? I have been talking so fucking fast on this live stream that I was sure that had already done over an hour, but we're only at 45 minutes right now. It seems crazy to me that that is the case. Right. Lydia says it's not enough anymore to point at Republicans and say that they are worse. I completely disagree with that, Lydia. I think that the Democratic Party has a better platform, has better politicians, and has a better history of governing both at the state and federal level. And I think the Republican politicians are not only more corrupt liars who have a terrible platform and a terrible governing history, but also their platform is to make corruption easier and more legal and harder to find and harder to detect. Righty. So yeah, for me, I don't think there's a wrong way to, advocate for Democratic politicians, And to somebody who says that the Democrats are just the anti-Republican Party, I will happily tell you about the 1,000 things that Democrats have done in the past and want to do in the future to help out everyday citizens like you and me. Alrighty, Bert says, no question yet today. I'll look for one. I'm just happy you're here, Berts. Welcome to the party, pal. Topa says corporate bribes, donations need to be limited. 100% agree with that. Topa also says the Democratic Party needs to find an identity, their own talking points. They became as blank as you can get. I disagree with that, Topa. The problem with trying to find a unifying messaging strategy for the Democratic Party is that the Democratic Party is a big tent. And at any point, we will have people as left-wing and progressive as Bernie Sanders and AOC, and people as right-wing centrist as Joe Manchin, Kristen Sinema, and Chuck Schumer. And I think that's the whole point of the Democratic Party, is that it is a big tent. That's obviously can be a disadvantage if we let it be. But if we lean into the advantages of being a big tent party and don't judge them by this impossible to meet standard where they can never be good enough or strong enough or win enough elections or be great enough at messaging for us to not deride them as being feckless and incompetent, I think people will recognize the strength of that diversity. Alrighty, Lydia says, but leftists have no tents. What do you mean by that, Lydia? Because I believe that leftists are part of that party, right? Or are you saying that leftists are exclusionary? Let me know what you think about that. Topa says, I'll go back to questions, sorry. Oh no, you're allowed to make statements, Topa. The you have to ask a question rule is for people who are posting right-wing propaganda and misinformation. That is my friendly way of saying that there's a way for you to have a difference of opinion and be a good part of this conversation. But if you're posting things that I generally agree with, but maybe like we disagree on the nuts and bolts, that's completely fine. All right, Abdib says, what happens to NATO if Greenland is invaded? So according to nations that are in NATO, American involvement in NATO is essential. I believe that there will be a different alliance that is formed without America. It might not be called NATO anymore. It might be called like the European, peace organization or something like that. The EPO, if you will. But yeah, there will still be that alliance. It just will be significantly less powerful, unfortunately. Okay, Real Bennett says, if Senate goes Democrat in 26, will Schumer be the leader? So according to insider reporting, Chuck Schumer wants to retire in 28, but he wants to retire as leader of the of the Senate Democrats, whether that's minority or majority. I think it would be a mistake to allow him to do that, because I do not believe that he is meeting the moment. I give Chuck Schumer a lot of credit for the things that he has accomplished as the Senate leader. I think that job is probably a lot harder than we give him credit for, having to appeal to both the far left and the center left. That being said, how you appear on the, in front of Americans, I think that matters. I think how you appear on the Sunday shows matters. And when Donald Trump is doing all of the wildly illegal and damaging shit that he is doing, to then go on the news and say, what are we doing about it? We wrote him a letter. I think that is disqualifying. I think that you are leaning into this impression that people have of Democrats being feckless and ineffective. So yeah, I have sent all of my reps information about party leadership needing to be replaced. I think it would be a mistake for him to stay, but also I don't think it's disqualifying if he does stay. Right. Lydia Carmela says it is not center left to deny G sides. That's interesting, Lydia. Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I agree with that. Obviously, I do not think that our politicians in the Democratic Party should be denying or equivocating or doing word salad about what Israel is doing to the people of Palestine. But I don't know that we get to say that you are not allowed to be a centrist or a left centrist or whatever if you deny that Israel is committing genocide against the people of Palestine. Um, yeah, I just don't think that that's productive. And I can understand why you might not feel that way. I can understand why you might be dogmatic about that. And I'm not going to try to change your mind about it. I just don't think that it's productive. So I'm not going to do it. Okay, Lydia, Canada and Europe, call it what it is. Why not America? Lydia says, yes, you do. What are you doing? Sophia, great to see you again. Says, how does redlining still oppress black people when it's no longer legal today? All right, so what I was trying to get to in my message to you earlier, Sophia, is about how because redlining put minority communities into very specific neighborhoods that did not have as much of a uh, didn't were not as wealthy, so that they could not afford to fund their schools the way that white neighborhoods were able to. It means that generations of minority communities got worse educations, and it means that then those generations of minority communities then were not able to get as good jobs as white communities were, because they got better educations. And so those people then go out and they do not great jobs, and then they have children who still live in those neighborhoods and still go to those terrible, not terrible, but less good schools. And then those people graduate or don't graduate, and then it's basically like this cycle of not being able to escape poverty. So the day that redlining stopped existing, we still had these communities of people who now could no longer afford to move out of those places. And we're stuck in this cycle because their children were not able to get the kind of education or opportunities for them to eventually get out of those neighborhoods. Now, as with everything in a society that is moving towards more financial equity across, different races, there are exceptions, and those exceptions can sometimes lead to more, people like, if you have somebody who becomes wildly successful in the African American community, and they can bring everybody who they know along with them, suddenly we have a couple of dozen people who were able to escape that cycle. But that's not even the tip of the iceberg. That's like 0.01% of the people that are stuck in those communities. Sophia, let me know what you think about that. Let's see here. Lydia, I don't know where we left off our conversation, but you said it's a red line and Dems need to understand that. I completely, again, Lydia, I completely agree with you. I'm curious what you were referring to when you said yes, you do. Let me know about that. But yeah, again, I don't believe that it is. I think that you're allowed to have that red line in the primary. But again, remember that Democrat who refuses to call what Israel is doing genocide, if they get elected, then they help the Democrats who do acknowledge that it's a genocide. Let's see here. Lydia says, "Oh, I said yes, we do have to hold them accountable." Oh, excellent. All right, sweet. Yeah. All right. Let's see here. Yeah, I cannot believe that we are not in an hour yet. What is going on today? Oy, 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 oy. All right. Sophia says, but that was in the past. As of 26, there are no laws preventing them from getting a better education. But the system is preventing them from getting a better education, Sophia, because where they live, their schools are underfunded. And their parents can potentially not afford to send them to a different school. Does that make sense, Sophia? Let me know. Okay, Lydia says humanity does not disappear post primaries. Yes, but the political calculus does stay, Lydia. So let's say hypothetically we have enough votes in Congress on the Democratic side to actually do something about stopping sending money and weapons to Israel, start putting pressure on them to stop doing G-side, that sort of thing. But because one Democrat lost their election to a Republican, we don't have the majority in the House or the Senate, and therefore we are not able to actually do that policy. So in this situation, if you're following me on this hypothetical, it would be better to support that Democrat who would not acknowledge the G side so that we could empower the Democrats who do acknowledge the G side to cast those votes that would actually stop sending money and weapons to Israel. Let me know. Jude says, can I join? I am 19 with good input. No tea, no shade, Jude, but I remember being 19 and I'm confident you don't. I'm being a little silly. I'm being a little fun. It's a Friday. I'm just teasing about how, when I was 19, I was an idiot. So Jude says, fuck all politics. Yeah, you are not doing yourself any favors if you're trying to get on my live stream. Lydia says, we have lost our democracy. It's gone. We need to move forward. Lydia, could not disagree with you stronger. What one person makes, another person can unmake, and vice versa. Democracy is not gone. It's not done. We can save things still. What you just said is what the billionaires want you to think. What you just said is what Republicans and Elon Musk want you to think. They want you to think resistance is futile. They want you to think the game is over. They want you to think that we fucked up the environment so much that there's no coming back from climate change, so we might as well all fucking go out and buy SUVs and fucking roll coal 24/7. But that's not the case. Better is possible. We can fix things. And so I'm glad you're still resisting, Lydia. But I also think, and no tea, no shade, I'm glad that you're here. I also think that just saying those things can push people into a kind of cynicism that removes themselves. They sort of like self-remove themselves from politics and from doing the work. Because why should I do the work when, I'm doomed to fail? Why don't I just go to the movies and hang out with my friends? At least I can enjoy our, unstoppable descent into chaos and death. Bert says, genuine question: how should I address Sarah McBride? I mean, no disrespect. Sarah McBride is the trans representative, the trans female representative, correct? I believe the way you should respond to her is as a she, her. I could be wrong about that. I would check out her website. Maybe she has some shit there about that. But yeah, if somebody is presenting as a female, I believe the way you respond to them is as a female, unless they are non-binary, in which you refer to them as they, them, I believe. Sophia says they can always move to new neighborhoods, but it's expensive to move to new neighborhoods, Sophia. And if those neighborhoods have better schools, that means that their property taxes are higher and their houses are more expensive. So in addition to moving just being an expensive thing that is prohibitive for a lot of people to actually make that change, additionally, could they even afford to have a house in that area? Does this make sense to you? Like, I think that you think it's easier for these people to fight their way out of poverty than it actually is. And it's not because they're worse people, it's because that's how our system is designed. Our system is designed to keep people poor, to make it hard for people to become middle class or even wealthy. Let me know what you think about this, Sophia. Let's see here. Raina says, it makes so much sense that Sophia is 19. Again, we are not teasing people for their age. Only I am allowed to do that to Jude, guy. This is my live stream. I'm the only one who's allowed to cast aspersions on 19-year-olds. Sophia's a regular. She always asks questions in good faith. She's nothing but polite. We're not throwing any tea or shade around here. All right. Can you believe I haven't been reported for bullying and harassment today, guys? Alrighty, let's see here. Grimacus says, moving to a new neighborhood also requires selling your previous home, and that's a lot harder to do when the neighborhood you're trying to move out of has been abandoned or even demonized by society. That is another really good point, Grimacus. Okay, Daniel says, I've met people who are 40 and complete idiots and intelligent people who are 16. Yeah, accurate. I was just being silly when I was teasing Jude for being 19. Wonder if Life says, I agree on the system, but would love to hear what you think the mechanism of that system is. Is that a second part of your question, Wonder? I'm not seeing the first part. Yeah, tell me a little bit more about that, Wonder. I'm not referring to keeping people poor. I agree on the system, that the system is trying to keep people poor, but I would love to hear what you think the mechanism of that system is. Um, the mechanism of the system that makes it so that poor people can't get out of poverty. Um, Monopolization is a big part of it. It is impossible to start a company to compete against Walmart because they, have this sort of like market capture. That's number one. Because of monopolization, there are fewer and fewer places where you can get a job, and that means that you are then for if Walmart is the only person hiring in your community, that means that you are going to be what's the word I'm looking for, toiling under starvation wages, and are going to have to go on welfare, for example. Because property taxes equal how well your public schools are funded, that means that you are not able to get the kind of quality education that means that you can get a better job in the future to lift yourself out of poverty. When you are poor, in order to survive, you sometimes need to take multiple jobs, working like 60 to 80 hours a week. When you're working that hard just to survive, you don't have time to get an education. You don't have time to work on your resume or explore other, options. Because we tie health insurance to your job, it makes it a lot less feasible for somebody to quit their job and look for something else, because then what do I do about health insurance? There are a million little ways in which the system keeps people poor. Alrighty, let's see here. All right, we are at an hour. Good Lord. I don't know why. Sometimes the hour just flies by, and sometimes I was just like, I can't believe it's only been an hour. That is nothing. This is not to cast aspersions on you guys. You guys have had excellent questions, excellent engagement today. I feel like we had some new faces here today, and I'm really excited to have you guys be part of the live stream community. If you guys want to support the show financially, you can, but you don't have to. I know that we're all struggling, but if you want to, you can. The mechanisms exist. You can join my Patreon for as little as $1 a month. You can send gifts and become super subscribers and super fans on TikTok and Twitch and YouTube. If you want to support the channel in a way that is completely free to you, and you are an Amazon Prime subscriber, all you got to do is subscribe to my Twitch channel using your Amazon Prime account. That is completely free to you, and it helps me out a ton. If there are any questions that I was not able to get to on this live stream, my DMs are open. You can email me through my website. You can hit me up on my Discord channel. I want to be a resource for you guys to be better informed and more involved in politics. And so I do not want you to be shy about reaching out to me. You can even reach out to me multiple times on different venues, just in case I don't see, like maybe your message got lost in the sauce on TikTok and you don't want to seem like a creep. So you're not going to message me on Discord because you don't want to double message, don't worry about that at all. I am not going to judge you on this at all. I want to be a resource for you guys. So use me and abuse me. Use me until I am all used up. I love the Discord because in addition to being a way to get in touch with me, there's also a great community there. And there's recommendations for podcasts and books, and also great organizations that you should 100% be donating your time and money to. I got a little bit of an announcement here, guys. On January 31st, my new stand-up special is premiering on YouTube. And so I hope that you all mark your calendars and watch when the premiere happens, because that way it'll help me out in the algorithm and hopefully lots of people will get to see it. It's called I'm Worried. Link is in my bio. If you go to my links page, there'll be an icon there that you can click on and reserve your spot for the premiere on January 31st. I hope you guys will all go and check that out. If you live in New York and you want to come see me do improv, I will be sitting in on an improv show at the Magnet Theater on January 17th. That information is up on my website right now. Special thanks to all of my patrons: Triska, Lauren, Kaislo, Sean, Dan, Hot Sauce, Robert, Shannon, Carmine, and Patrick. Y'all are the best. Regular streaming schedule is Monday through Friday, starting around 11:30 a.m. Pacific time. And lastly, just my heartfelt plea that you guys all do the work, because it is only through us doing the work that we are able to stop what is currently going on. Arnie says, I don't understand how you can be a liberal. I'm happy to get into that, Arnie. Is there a specific issue that you would like me to talk about? Because, I can just sort of like, spitball all of the, what do you call it? I can just spitball some of the issues that I care about, but if you want a specific issue that you think liberals are off base on, then I'm happy to talk about that. Arnie, let me know. Fang Tooth Goat says, can I ask you one last question before you end? Of course. Let's see here. Raina, I do believe that Sophia is in Alabama. Daniel says, he sounds more like a social democrat than a liberal. I think potentially Arnie is just using liberal as like a catch-all for people on the left, Democrats, etc. Ooh, righty. Lauren, you don't need to dress up. No one will see. No one will see how you are dressed while you are watching my YouTube special from your home. All right. Yeah, Arnie just came in here to call me a jerk, apparently, and then dipped, I will not tell you how to live your life. Let's see here. Fangtooth Goat says, I have family members that are pro-Trump that are from Venezuela that are confident socialism is bad. Okay, Fangtooth, I'm with you. What's your question? Okay. Sophia says, but they aren't in poverty because they are black. In the past they were, but since then we changed our laws. So legitimate question, Sophia. Do you really not see the way that redlining has led to communities of people in minority neighborhoods being poor still today? Because, I thought I did a pretty good job of connecting those dots. If not, maybe that's my bad. But, my kind of like overall thesis statement here is that it is way harder to get out of poverty than you probably think it is. And even if, the day after redlining ended, did not make it so that those poor communities were then able to not be poor communities anymore. Let me know where the disconnect is happening here, because I'm happy to walk you through the steps if necessary. Okay, Fangtooth says, how do I convince them that it's good? So I think the main thing, Fangtooth, is getting people to recognize that these words have different meanings depending on who you talk to. Let's see here. Dan says, with all due respect, that new video changed my mind. Change your mind about what, Dan? So yeah, your parents see socialism as being what Venezuela was under Maduro. But that's not like really what socialism is. That was a dictatorship, like he was not duly elected. He was stealing resources from the country. He was starving his people so that him and his buddies could be rich and powerful. That's not socialism, that's a kleptocracy. But because he called it a socialist government, now that's a cudgel that people on the right can use to say, oh, look, socialism means kleptocracy, So in lieu of that, then just don't use that word, Say, these are the policies that me and the people on the left are for. And some people call them socialist, but that's not what Maduro was doing, right? Like Maduro was not doing the things that the people on the left are saying that they want to do, right? When you have people that are like MAGA people, the work of getting them to change their mind is very difficult. And so if that's something that you want to do, I say go for it. There's a book called The Persuaders that I have a link for on my Discord channel that I think would be instrumental in, sort of like showing you how it's possible to do that. You got to do a lot of listening. You got to do a lot of finding common ground. You got a lot of sort of like reality checking, meaning like, do we even agree on what is happening in the world right now? Sort of a thing. But yeah, it's difficult. It's very difficult. And yeah, yeah, if there are ways that I can help you, like shoot me a DM or some shit like that. But yeah, 100%. There are ways to do it. It just takes a lot of time and energy. Alrighty, Gamer Jam says, I am fully ready to live under the imaginary left-wing authoritarian regime that right-winger straw man democratic socialism into, just to see if all of these bootlicking conservatives truly believe all people must always comply with the orders of government agents. Yeah, you know, the hypocrisy is real in the culture war, Gamer Jam. That is accurate as all. Bert says, is it weird that I'm the only one in my family that leans towards Republican? My family is blue. I think it, you know, it's not unheard of, Bert's, but yeah, I definitely think it's a little weird, being a progressive Democrat myself. You know, Bert's, I would love to chat with you about the things that make you lean towards being a Republican. I can't remember if we've done it before on a different live stream, but yeah, I'd love to get into it. All right, everybody, I'm gonna get out of here. Thanks again for being here, for all of your supports, your likes, your shares, your gifts, your questions, your comments. Do the work, please. Be good to yourselves. Self-care is part of the work. Be good to each other. Don't get into fights with other voters. It's not worth it. It's not productive. And I will see you guys on Monday. Same bat time, same bat channel. Have a great weekend, everybody. Bye-bye. Goodbye, 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 goodbye.